My name is Joe. You can find me everywhere online at Tattoo Theist. You can also follow our podcast at Theist Thesis. Across social media, most of them are new, but they're up, so you can find them. Also, all links for anything that matters ever can be found at tattootheist.com. You've got the latest podcast video. You've got the podcast audio. You've got my YouTube videos, some merch and whatnot. And then the most important thing is going to be down here, access to the Discord. You can just hit join now or join Discord, and then you'll get in there. So the podcast is every Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Time. And the way to get on and speak is just to join the Discord. We don't charge you money to come on the podcast. As long as you're present, you're in. You can speak. Every week we do a community poll that decides what the topic is. I do not decide. The community decides. So there's that. Today, I want to talk very briefly on Lilith, because we've been talking about it in the podcast. I've also just been talking, about it personally with people. There's a lot of confusion around Lilith. And I get why, just because even the things we're pretty secure about in the Bible, the reality is that we're not really sure of much, right? So something as barely touched on in the Bible as Lilith is going to be wildly confusing, right? So I've got kind of some key things to hop into, but as always, just understand the amount of information that we have is extremely limited. More so than a lot of this other stuff that we talk about, right? So just you need to understand that, you need to be okay with it, and we need to be honest about it. So actually, let's jump into this first. If you pull up your Bible and you go to Isaiah 34:14, in most newer translations, you're going to find it something similar to this. And there's two things you need to pay attention to. So it says this: desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and wild goats will bleat to each other. There the night creatures will also lie down and find themselves a place of rest. So I know you're thinking, Joe, I don't see anything about Lilith in this verse. What are we talking about? I got you. Sit tight, grab some popcorn, chill, and we'll jam through this super quick. Now, if you go into some older translations, you'll find that same verse written like this: wildcats shall meet with hyenas, goat demons shall call to each other, there too Lilith shall repose and find a place to rest. So what were the two differences in the translations? One is wild goats is what you're going to find in most new translations. So what did they take out, or what did they translate differently? They took out the word demons. It's rather important to get that, right? The second thing is in the newer translations, you're going to see night creatures or night bird or something to that effect. In the older translations, you have Lilith. Interesting things to understand. One of these older translations, if you want to look it up for yourself, is the NRSV. That should still say demons and Lilith. So most translations will omit the name Lilith. And like I said, they're going to put in night creatures or night bird. And in the ESV, night bird has a note attached to it that says identity unknown. Is that honest? You could say it's an omission. You could say it's not technically dishonest. But to me personally, I take that as blatant dishonesty. You're being dishonest. We at least have an idea of who that was, of what the identity was. And that identity was most likely Lilith. So one thing that we need to understand first, and we've been talking about this a lot as we go through demonology. We did 2 parts of demonology in the podcast. You need to understand that a lot of things that have been taken out of the Bible, the number one topic that has been pulled or redacted or changed over time from the Christian Bible are things that are overtly spiritual. Things having to do with angels and things having to do with demons. But the things also, one just to know, is fasting. Fasting, references to fasting as a spiritual weapon on our side has been wildly watered down over the years throughout Christian history as the Bibles have translated. But just keep in your head that the idea, the concept, the topic of spirituality has been overtly watered down and redacted from the Bible throughout Christian history. Why? For a reason. right? Because there is so much power in truly being spiritual and truly understanding these spiritual realms, right? To the realm of good, the realm of evil. We have such a high ability to tap into these spiritual realms. And still, throughout Christian history, our own faith, they have removed, they have changed, they have altered these concepts that have to do with spirituality. Just something to understand. It's not what we're talking about today. So I'm going to cut it right there because I could blab about that forever. And we can go in deep to the conspiracies about it. But it's not a conspiracy if it's a fact, right? Those two things are not synonymous. They're in controversy with each other. It is a fact that over Christian history, we have removed spirituality largely from the Bible. Are there still references to demons? Yes. Are there still references to angels? Yes. But if you look at the apocryphal texts, if you look at some of these verses like right here, this is still in our Bible. We call it canon. However, it's been changed. We've taken demons out. We've taken a specific demon named Lilith out. Twofold in just that one verse. And I can give you a lot of examples. But who the heck is Lilith, man? And why was her name removed from all of the more popular Bible translations? Lilith was first mentioned in Babylonian texts, described as a winged female demon that attacks pregnant women and infants. The legends of Lilith spread throughout Anatolia, Syria, Israel, Egypt, and Greece. According to appearing in our Bible through Isaiah as a wilderness demon who would haunt the destroyed kingdom of Edom. So her legacy, it really grew through ancient Judaism quite a bit, actually, quite a bit. During the Middle Ages, Jewish sources began to claim her as Adam's first wife, which we'll touch on very briefly, because there's basically two key things here to understand with Lilith. Is one, she was a demon, right? And two is that there's a lot of mythology, there's a lot of extra biblical content that is regarding her as Adam's first wife. And we'll touch on that briefly in just a second. So how did Lilith evolve? And if you guys want me to do a more detailed video about her in general, because I'm going to try to keep this short, and on her as Adam's first wife, because there's a lot of early Jewish literature about this, and outside of Judaism, there's still literature about it. It's super, super interesting. So if you guys want me to do a video on that, I can definitely do that. But let's jump into the wife thing real quick, and then we'll go into some scholar comments on it, and then we'll wrap it up. And if you guys want me to do more about Lilith, I can definitely do that. So here is a quote. This is Genesis 2. Nope, I'm sorry. This is Genesis 1:27. So God created humankind in his image, in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So what is that saying? First off, it's saying he made men and women right there, right? That's what it says. Yeah, we can argue about interpretation for sure. We can do that until the cows come home. However, that's what it says. Okay, now going into Genesis 2, then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man. This is Adam, obviously. And he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. That's Genesis 2:7-21-22. So in the post-biblical period, some ancient Jewish scholars took the stance that Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 2:21-22 must describe two separate events, since it appeared that the woman is created differently in these accounts. So the idea is that Lilith was made in the image of God with Adam in Genesis 1:27. Then we're going to talk about what happened to Lilith. Where did she go? Blah, blah, blah. We're going to get there. Hold on. But then in Genesis 2:21-22, with the rib, God made Eve from Adam. And it gets deep and it gets interesting. So just chill. One professor explains it this way. He says, quote, considering every word of the Bible to be accurate and sacred, commentators needed a midrash, which is basically a commentary, or story to explain the disparity in the creation narrative of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. God creates woman twice, once with man from dust and once from man from his rib. So there must have been two women total. The Bible names the second woman Eve, and Lilith was identified as the first in order to complete the story. This was between the 8th and the 10th century. So Lilith's creation is recounted in the Tales of Ben Sira, an apocryphal work from the 10th century CE. Dan Ben Amos explains that although this is the first extant text that records the legend of Lilith, her story most likely existed much earlier than this. Quote, after the Holy One created the first human being, Adam, he said, it is not good for Adam to be alone. He created a woman also from the earth and called her Lilith. They quarreled immediately. They fought immediately. They quarreled immediately. So as soon as God makes them, they start fighting. Lilith says, I will not lie below you during sex. He said, I will not lie below you, but above you, for you are fit to be below me, and I above you. She responded, we are both equal because we both come from the earth. Neither listened to the other. When Lilith realized what was happening, she pronounced the ineffable name of God and flew off into the air. She flew away. Okay. Adam rose in prayer before the Creator, before God, saying, the woman you gave me has fled from me. Immediately, the Holy One sent 3 angels after her. This is interesting, man. So hang on. The Holy One said to Adam, if she wants to return, all the better. If not, she will have to accept that 100 of her children will die every day. The angels went after her, finally locating her in the sea, in the powerful waters in which the Egyptians were destined to perish. They told her what God had said, and she did not want to return. That comes from Alphabet of Ben Sira 23, A through B. The angels were sent to pursue Lilith, but when they reached her, she refused to return with them to the Garden of Eden. Okay, so she says, leave me. I was created only to cause sickness to infants. If the infant is male, I have dominion over him for 8 days after his birth, and if female, for 20 days. The Tales of Ben Sira, again, that's where that comes from. As a compromise, though, she promised that whenever she saw the angels' names, one of the 3 angels' names, or forms, so their form, on amulets, she would leave the child alone. She also agreed that 100 of her children, who, again, are their demons, would die every day. That was the deal, right? If she doesn't come back. The previously mentioned professor, the one I just read from, expands by adding the following. He says, Lilith sins by uttering the sacred syllables, thereby demonstrating to the medieval audience her unworthiness to reside in paradise. So Lilith flies away, having gained power to do so by pronouncing God's avowed name. So that's where she got the power to be able to fly away. Though made of the earth, she is not earthbound. Her dramatic departure reestablishes for a new generation Lilith's supernatural character as a winged devil. And that is the way that she's portrayed if you look her up. The professor also explains then that Lilith's hatred for human babies, again, Ben Sira's story suggests that Lilith is driven to kill babies in retaliation for Adam's mistreatment and God's insistence on slaying 100 of her progeny every day. Another slightly different take on this historical account, though, about Lilith is this. Lilith is an extremely controversial figure within Jewish folklore, and that is true. If you really get into some of the old Jewish folklore, it's very expansive, especially in interpretation and in differences. However, the general theme of the story is identical. It's the same. It's mostly identical. Lilith's name is not included in the creation story of the Torah, but she appears in several midrashic texts. Again, that is like a commentary. These are not quite a commentary, but it's probably the closest thing I could say that it would make sense to you guys. It's essentially a commentary from scholars and theologians of the time. Her symbolism, history, and literature are debated among Jewish scholars, feminists, and other intellectuals as well. There are multiple origin stories for Lilith, but the most popular history told views Lilith as the first wife of Adam. Again, according to the first Eve story, Lilith was created by God from dust and placed to live in the garden with Adam until problems arose between Adam and Lilith, when Adam tried to exercise dominion over her. So this is one thing that you'll hear a lot, is that basically what it was is they were about to have sex, okay? Adult content. And Adam wanted to be on top. And she was like, nah, dude, lay down. I am on top. And Adam's like, nah, we're not doing that. No. I am the man. I am I am who I am. You are the woman. Lay down. So that's kind of the general idea. There's more to that, though. It wasn't just a sexual thing, but that's brought up a lot. So just understand that. But understand, too, that is not the full story. So if you go to look this up by yourself and you see it made to be about just sex, understand that is an absolute distraction, and it is not the truth. It was a portion of it, but what is sex? A smaller portion of a bigger portion of just relationship gender roles. Just understand that. It's important to understand. One story tells that Lilith refused to lay beneath Adam during sex. She believed they were created equal, both from the dust of the earth. Thus, she should not have to lay beneath him. After Adam disagreed is when Lilith then fled the Garden of Eden to gain her independence. Adam told God that Lilith had left, and God sent 3 angels to retrieve her. This is where it slightly differs from the previous story that I told you. The 3 angels found Lilith in a cave bearing children, but Lilith refused to come back to the garden. Where was she in the previous explanation? She was out at sea. Okay, so slight difference. Does it change anything fundamental? Absolutely not. The angels told her they would kill 100 of her children every day for her disobedience. In revenge, she is said to have robbed children of their life and is responsible for the death of stillborn infants and crib deaths, which is also called SIDS. Male children are at risk of Lilith's wrath for 8 days after birth until circumcision, and girls are at risk for 20 days. Although Lilith stole children's lives in the night, she agreed not to kill the children who had amulets of either of the 3 angels. So again, she said, anything that bears your name or form on an amulet, I will pass over, and I will not kill those children. After the angel's departure, Lilith tried to return to the garden, but upon her arrival, she discovered that Adam had already another mate. Her name was Eve. Out of revenge, Lilith had sex with Adam while he was sleeping and stole his seed. It's a wild story, man. This story gets wild, and we are barely just touching the surface here. We're almost done, so hang tight. We're 17 minutes in. With his seed, she bears Lilium, earthbound demons to replace her children killed by the angels. Super interesting. Lilith is also said to be responsible for males' erotic dreams and night emissions. Another theory says that Lilith is impregnated, thus creating more demons by masturbation and erotic dreams. So Lilith is tied into a lot of sexual things having to do with men and sexual sin, which is interesting. Take it more broad, right? Take Lilith out and take demons in general. Demons are just a way that we choose in our fallible human minds, in our restricted human minds, to express the epitome of evil, right? We live on an earth that is relatively neutral between moral and immoral, good and bad, light and dark. And there is a spiritual realm of goodness, and that is God. And there's a spiritual realm of evil, and that is, in Christianity, Satan. But these are entities of some kind that are just bad. They are the epitome of bad, right? So think about it in terms of that. Men who have issues with sexual sin, and women, it's definitely both. Men are just more physically driven, so men are always called out. But anybody who has issues with sexual sin, there is a thought that every action we take, every thought that we have, anything that goes down here on earth is either influenced by good or evil. Nothing is truly neutral. So in that case, Lilith could be basically the way that humans chose to be able to identify what the demonic influence in sexual sin is. And maybe not as a specific entity. Maybe Lilith herself was not a specific entity, but the author chose to use Lilith, a specific entity, to be able to actually tell a story. Because when we're talking about these general concepts like the epitome of evil, and it's not specific things like Satan or Lilith or Baal, then it's harder for people to conceptualize that, just because the human mind doesn't work that way. We can only experience and we can only understand things that we have experienced with our senses. If we haven't experienced something with our senses, our brains literally are incapable of understanding it, right? Our brain is incapable of visualizing it, of being able to see in our head a story or see a concept We can only conceptualize that which we have already experienced. That's how the human experience works. So there's a lot of ideas, and I got to try to keep it short. There's a lot of ideas that much of what was put in the Bible that has been specified is actually just an easier way of explaining or expressing a concept that is so broad and is so outside of our human understanding. Consider Job. For example, God makes it clear to Job that there is so much happening outside of his understanding that how arrogant would you be, Job, to try to understand that which you cannot conceive, that which is outside of your human ability to conceive. So perhaps Lilith was a specific entity who was literally, Adam's first wife and then rebelled. However, it's possible that Lilith is just the way we chose to identify and understand, to tell the story in a way that the reader then would truly be able to conceptualize the concept. And you can take that so deep. So if you guys want me to do another video on this, I can definitely do that. But just understand, why was she removed from the Bible? This is anyone's guess, really. But much of the demonic text, again, I need you to really understand, much of the overtly spiritual things in the Bible have been removed. They've been changed and they've been watered down. The Bibles that we read today are not truly inerrant. They're just not. Does that mean we don't put weight in it? No. But it's better to know that and understand that and wrestle with that than to be one of these lukewarm, watered down Christians that just accepts, oh no, it's perfect. The Bible's perfect. It's never been changed. It's not even a conversation. The Bible has absolutely been changed. The Bible has absolutely had things taken out of it. The Bible has absolutely been translated in bias and dishonest ways. That's a fact. It's an absolute fact. And it drives me insane that Christians are willing to live in ignorance. Wake up. Just be honest. It doesn't negate the Bible. It's a historic document. It's a collection of a ton of different historical documents that has lasted this long. The idea that it would be absolutely perfect is just childish. We need to grow up. It's not perfect. We do the best we can with what we have. And my greatest advice to anybody, get outside the Bible. Should leave the Bible? No. Get outside the Bible to add greater context, a more thorough context to the Bible itself. Read the Apocrypha, specifically read Enoch, and then read midrashes from old Jewish scholars who knew what was going on, who have accounts that perhaps shed more light on things like the reference to Lilith, specifically with things that in these newer Christian translations, we've chosen to be absolutely dishonest and just outright remove it. Get outside the Bible. Be in the Bible first. But then get outside the Bible, get a greater understanding, get a wider angle lens, and really see what's going on. I love you guys. We're going to shut it down because I've passed 20 minutes. Again, if you guys want me to do more on Lilith, if you want to talk more about the good and evil and the examples in the Bible where perhaps a specific example of something was, again, perhaps a way to allow the human readers to conceptualize something that is not possible to conceptualize as a human, these greater spiritual contexts. Let me know. I love you guys. I'll see you Monday night this week for Bible study.